I caught my spoiled sister making out with my BF a week before her wedding. I couldn't take it and called her fiancé. I thought he had ignored it, but he made a huge announcement on the wedding day at 28th was in a difficult situation, with my sister 26 and my boyfriend 29 meters. My sister's wedding was coming up, and I noticed she was acting strange around my boyfriend. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just little things that made me uncomfortable. It started with small comments. My sister would say things like, "Wow, you're so funny," to my boyfriend's jokes. Even when weren't that great, she laughed a bit too hard at everything he said. I tried to brush it off at first, thinking maybe she was just being extra friendly because of the wedding excitement, but then I noticed more. She started finding reasons to touch him. Casually, a hand on his arm when talking, or bumping into him accidentally when walking past. It was subtle, but it was there. I saw her eyes lingering on him a bit too long when he wasn't looking. It made my stomach churn. I tried to talk to my boyfriend about it one night after got home from a family dinner where my sister had been particularly flirty. I brought it up. "Did you notice how Sarah was acting tonight?" I asked, and he looked confused. "What do you mean?" I explained what I had seen, the laughing, the touching, the looks. He listened, but then he just shrugged. "I think you're reading too much into it," he said. "Sheck, probably just excited about the wedding. It's harmless." But it didn't feel harmless to me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to keep a closer eye on things, hoping I was wrong. The next few weeks were tense. Every time we were around my sister, I found myself watching her like a hawk. I noticed more and more little things that bothered me. She would always sit next to my boyfriend as she'd find excuses to ask for his help with wedding-related tasks, even though I was right. There one day we were all at my parents' house for a family barbecue. I went inside to use the bathroom, and when I came back out, I saw my sister and my boyfriend talking quietly in a corner of the yard. They were standing close together, and my sister was giggling at something he said. When they saw me, they quickly stepped apart, and my sister walked away. I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to confront them right then and there, but I didn't want to cause a scene at the family gathering. Instead, I waited until we got home that night. "What were you and Sarah talking about earlier?" I asked my boyfriend as casually as I could. He looked surprised by the question. "Oh, just some wedding stuff." She was asking my opinion on the music selection. I raised an eyebrow. "And that required you to stand so close together," he sighed. "Come on, not this again. I told you there's nothing going on. Sarah's just being friendly." I could pull back any more. Friendly? She's practically throwing herself at you, and you're not doing anything to stop it. He looked hurt. "What do you want me to do?" "She's your sister. I'm trying to be nice to her. I can't just tell her to go away." "You could set some boundaries," I said. "You could make it clear you're not interested." "But I'm not interested," he insisted. "There's nothing to make clear. You're seeing things that aren't there." We argued for a while, but it went nowhere. He kept insisting I was imagining things, and I couldn't make him see what was so obvious to me. In the end, we went to bed angry and frustrated. The next day, I decided I needed to talk to my sister directly. I called her and asked if we could meet for coffee. She agreed, sounding cheerful and oblivious to my concerns. We met at a small cafe near her apartment. I was nervous, my hand shaking slightly as I stirred my coffee. My sister chatted happily about plans, not noticing my discomfort. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Sarah," I interrupted her, "we need to talk about something." She looked at me, surprised by my serious tone. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "I've noticed how you've been acting around Tom lately," I said, referring to my boyfriend. "The flirting, the touching, the way you look at him. It needs to stop." Her face went through a range of emotions: surprise, confusion, then anger. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "I haven't been flirting with Tom." "Yes, you have," I insisted. "Maybe you don't realize you're doing it, but you are, and it's making me very uncomfortable." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You're being ridiculous. Tom's practically family. I'm just being friendly. It's more than that," I said. "You're always finding excuses to be near him, to touch him. You laugh at all his jokes, even the bad ones. It's obvious what you're doing." Her face flushed. "I can't believe you're accusing me of this," she said, "especially right before my wedding. Are you really that insecure?" Her words stung, but I pressed on. "This isn't about insecurity. It's about respect. You're crossing a line, and it needs to stop." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. She said, you're being paranoid and ridiculous. If you can't trust your own sister, that's your problem, not mine. She stormed out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there alone. I felt awful. Had I made a mistake? Was I really just being paranoid? When I got home, my boyfriend was there. He could tell something was wrong. As soon as I walked in, what happened, he asked. I told him about my conversation with Sarah. As I spoke, his face grew more and more concerned. When I finished, he sighed heavily. I think you've made a big mistake. He said, Sarah's going to be really hurt by this. And right before her wedding too. I felt defensive. So you're taking her side? He shook his head. I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying I really don't think Sarah was flirting with me. And even if she was, which I doubt, confronting her like this wasn't the way to handle it. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. So what was I supposed to do? Just ignore? He came over and put his arms around me. You could have talked to me more about it, or maybe talked to Sarah in a less accusatory way. Now, she's probably going to be upset with both of us, and it's going to make the wedding really awkward. I pulled away from him. So this is all my fault. He sighed again. I didn't say that. I just think he may have overreacted a bit. We argued some more, but it was clear we weren't going to agree. Eventually, he went to bed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The next few days were tense. My sister wasn't speaking to me. My parents called, wanting to know why Sarah was so upset. I tried to explain, but I could tell they thought I was overreacting too. The wedding was getting closer, and I didn't know what to do. I was supposed to be a bridesmaid, but now I wasn't sure if Sarah even wanted me there. My boyfriend was still invited, and he said he thought we should both go to show. There were no hard feelings, but the thought of watching my sister walk down the aisle, knowing how upset she was with me, made me feel sick. I tried to call Sarah a few times, but she didn't answer. I left voicemails apologizing, saying we needed to talk, but she never called back. I even went to her apartment, but she wouldn't open the door. As the wedding day got closer, I felt more and more anxious. My boyfriend kept telling me to relax, that everything would blow over, but I wasn't so sure. I had a nightmare where I showed up at the wedding and everyone turned to stare at me, whispering and pointing. He woke up in a cold sweat. Update: things got worse after my confrontation with Sarah. She told our mom about my accusations, and Mom was furious with me. She called me, yelling about how I could be so selfish and paranoid right before Sarah's wedding. How could you accuse your own sister of such a thing? She demanded. I tried to explain my side, but she wouldn't listen. She told me I needed to apologize to Sarah immediately and fix this mess. The tension in our family was unbearable. Sarah still wouldn't speak to me, and now my parents were upset too. My boyfriend, Tom, kept insisting I was overreacting, which only made me feel more lonely and frustrated. A week before the wedding, I went to my parents' house to try and smooth things over. As I approached the front door, I heard muffled voices from the side of the house. Curious, I walked around to the garden and froze in shock at what I saw there. Partially hidden behind a large shrub were Sarah and Tom. They were locked in a passionate embrace, kissing deeply. Tom's hand was under Sarah's shirt, and her legs were wrapped around his waist. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't even notice me standing there. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. All the air left my lungs, and for a moment I couldn't move or speak. Then, as the reality of what I was seeing sank in, a wave of anger and betrayal washed over me. What the hell is this? I screamed. They jumped hard, looking guilty and shocked. Sarah's face went pale while Tom started stammering. It's not what it looks like, but it was exactly what it looked like. All my suspicions, all my fears that everyone had dismissed as paranoia, were suddenly confirmed in the worst possible way. How could you? I choked out, tears streaming down my face. My own sister and my boyfriend Sarah started crying too. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. We didn't mean for this to happen, but I couldn't bear to hear their excuses. I turned and ran back to my car, ignoring their calls for me to come back. As I drove away, my phone started ringing, first Tom, then Sarah, then my mom. I ignored them all. When I got home, I packed a bag with some clothes and essentials. I sent a text to Tom, we're done. Don't try to contact me again. Then I turned off my phone and left. I'm writing this from a hotel room in a nearby city. I don't know what I'm going to do next. The wedding is in a few days, but there's no way I can attend now. My relationship is over. And my relationship with my sister may never recover from this betrayal. I feel like my whole world has been turned upside down. Everyone made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting something, but I was right all along. I don't know how I'll ever trust anyone again after this. So, Reddit, any advice on how to move forward from here would be appreciated. Update: after the shock of catching my sister Sarah with my now ex-boyfriend Tom, I spent a few days and a days barely able to process what had happened. My phone was flooded with messages and missed calls from both of them as well as from my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Eventually, I realized there was one person who deserved to know the truth: Mark, Sarah's fiance. With a heavy heart, I called him. When Mark answered, I could hear the confusion in his voice. "Hey, what's going on? Sarah's been a mess saying you disappeared and won't talk to anyone." I took a deep breath and told him everything. I explained my initial suspicions, how everyone had dismissed my concerns, and finally what I had witnessed in my parents' garden. As I spoke, Mark remained silent, only occasionally making a sound to indicate he was still listening. When I finished, there was a long pause. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Thank you for telling me. I need some time to think about this." That was all he said before hanging up. I sat there staring at my phone, wondering what he would do with this information. As the wedding day approached, I heard nothing from Mark or my family. Sarah had stopped trying to contact me, and I assumed she had convinced Mark to forgive her. The thought that she might actually get away with this, that she would get her happily ever after while my life lay in ruins, made me feel sick. I decided not to attend the wedding. I couldn't bear the thought of watching Sarah walk down the aisle knowing what she had done. Instead, I planned to spend the day alone trying to figure out how to piece my life back together. However, the evening of the wedding, I received a call from my cousin Emma. Her voice was hushed and excited. "Oh my God, you won't believe what just happened." Confused, I asked her what she meant. Emma launched into her story. "So, everything seemed normal at first. Sarah looked beautiful in her dress, and Mark was standing at the altar. But when it came time for the vows, Mark stepped forward and said he had an announcement to make." My heart started racing as Emma continued. "Mark told everyone that he couldn't go through with the wedding. He said I can't marry someone who would betray her own sister and ruin her life by getting involved with her boyfriend." Sarah went completely pale. Then Mark turned to your parents and said, "I'm sorry, but I think you should know the real reason why your daughter hasn't been speaking to any of you." Emma went on to describe the chaos that ensued. Sarah burst into tears. My parents looked shocked and confused, and the guests started whispering among themselves. Mark apparently walked out of the church, leaving Sarah sobbing at the altar. It was like something out of a movie. Emma said, "Everyone's still in shock. Your parents are trying to get the full story from Sarah, but she's a complete mess." I sat there stunned. Part of me felt justified that the truth had finally come out, but another part felt sad for the pain this would cause my family. "Are you okay?" Emma asked. When I didn't respond, "I don't know," I answered. Honestly, I never wanted it to end like this. After talking to Emma for a bit longer, I hung up and sat in silence, trying to process everything. The truth was out, but at what cost? My relationship with Tom was over. My bond with Sarah was shattered, and now my entire family was in turmoil. I realized that while the truth had come to light, it didn't magically fix everything. I still had a long road ahead in terms of healing and rebuilding trust. But for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a small sense of relief. At least now I could start to move forward without the weight of unspoken truths holding me down. As for what comes next, I'm not sure. I know I'll need to face my family eventually, but for now I'm taking it one day at a time. If nothing else, this experience has taught me the importance of trusting my instincts and standing up for myself, even when others doubt me. To those who supported me through this ordeal, thank you. Your words of encouragement meant more than you know. And to those in similar situations, remember, trust your gut and don't let anyone gaslight you into doubting your own perceptions.